Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to There's No Business Like. I'm Katie Traska-Miller with Michigan Maven Creative Associates, your host for the episode this week. And we have a very special guest with us today, Olivia Aston Bosworth from the Alliance Theater in Atlanta, Georgia. I am so excited to have a conversation with Olivia today about a whole host of topics. So welcome, Olivia, to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Katie. Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Aston Bosworth. I'm the Dan Reardon Director of Youth and Families at the Alliance Theater and the board president of TYA USA.
That's actually the first thing we're going to talk about is TYA USA. But before we get there, I'd love to just know a little bit more about you. So where did you start in your arts career and how did you end up at the Alliance Theater?
Yeah, I mean, I can trace this all the way back to, being a kid who loved to dress up and pretend and write stories as young as I can remember. But it all sort of really started forming when I was in high school. Kennesaw Mountain High School had two key pieces, or there were two key moments in my high school career that launched me into my trajectory of my career today. So when I was a sophomore in high school, I participated in our TYA class, which is like the top tier class you can take. You have to do Shakespeare, you have to do scene study before you can get into our TYA class. And it's because they would open that up as a field trip opportunity for local elementary schools. So early on, I was performing TYA and fell in love with theater for young audiences as a form. And as a junior, I auditioned for this program called the Palevsky Collision Project at the Alliance Theater. That is a 3-week intensive for high schoolers in Atlanta to collide with a classic text in order to create our own piece of theater and performance. So when I was accepted into the program, I met my mentors, one of my dear friends, Chris Moses, who is now the artistic director at the Alliance Theater, and Rosemary Newcott, who was a former TYA artistic director here at the Alliance. So two key people that I met very early on in my love of TYA. But right out of college, because I made these two connections, I instantly jumped into working with the drama camps here at the Alliance. I was a teaching artist. And then there was this one day that changed everything. I was sitting at the front desk in the Alliance studio suite, waiting to check in students for class. And it was late afternoon. I watched an 18-month-old toddler toddle by the front desk, just alone, walking in, and she went into a studio. And then Rosemary Newcott and Salisa Kalki, who is our former director of new projects, were walking in conversation behind her, didn't even notice I was sitting there, just were in deep discussion and walked right in behind her into a studio. That was enough to pique my interest. So I popped in and said, "What's going on in here?" Because I knew we didn't have classes for toddlers at that time. And they said, "Oh, Rosemary just got back from a trip to see this new form of theater for the very young. And we really want to bring it to the Alliance." And I said, "That sounds cool. Can I play with this toddler while you talk?" And so I was hearing the conversation. I was connecting with this very young little artist. The toddler ended up being Salisa's daughter, Kate, who is now in high school. And I just saw her the other day. It's bananas how big she's gotten, how grown she is. And ever since then, I've been in love with the idea of theater for the very young. So as we were leaving that meeting and I was holding, hand in hand with Kate, I looked at Rosemary and I said, "I need in whatever way. I will volunteer. I will work, whatever you need. I want to be a part of this theater for the very young journey." And she said, "Okay, well, we need a stage manager. Have you ever done that?" And I did what every good actor does. And I lied. I said, "Yes, of course. Yes, ma'am. Sure. I can totally do that." I was 20, 21. Yeah, sure. I can totally do that. And I learned everything I could about stage managing before that first day. But what I found and what we found here at the theater, and we've been running theater for the very young ever since, what I learned early on was that the stage manager, the chaos that they need to be able to manage is actually on the stage. It's with the audience. So my skills as a performer came into play because I then, in every show I was a part of, I was in role as a part of the story, and I was stage managing the physical stage. And then we also had folks that were helping me out with any lighting and sound cues. So ever since then, I've been working on our Theater for the Very Young productions. I now oversee our Theater for the Very Young, our youth and family classes and workshops, festivals, and activities. I founded the Toddler Takeover here at the Woodruff Arts Center, and I run our free artist childcare program. So as a smattering of things that I do, those are the main programs that I oversee.
So Alliance Theater, this is a full circle moment for you. So this is where you started, where you fell in love with this form of theater, and now you're running the programming there, which is really amazing. And that feeds into your work with TYA USA. So what is it like to sort of start in a place, leave, go away to college, work elsewhere, and then come back to where your home is, really?
I mean, it's incredible. It's kind of like a dream come true. And I think about how I got to where I am now from where I first started. When I had my first audition and interview for the Collision Project was just down the hall. And I think about like what got me there. And it was the connections that I was making along the way. So my high school drama teacher believed in me and connected me with Rosemary Newcott for that first audition. So making an impression in every room that you step into has been such a big like thing that I play in the back of my head. Anytime I go in somewhere where I feel like I don't know what I'm doing in this room, right? You get a little bit of like imposter syndrome creeping up, or how am I a part of this conversation? But I think about, well, who here can I connect with on some level so we can find ways to work together in the future? How can we impact each other's lives? So I think the connection aspect of it has been huge. Connecting the dots from my high school experience as a Collision Project student to working here at the theater and working on theater for the very young, to becoming the board president at TYA USA has always been a part of this. It has been this connection with Rosemary Newcott. So I actually got introduced to TYA USA through the conference. At the time, it was called One Theater World. In 2011, Rosemary was on the board, and she really took me under her wing and was trying to help me find my way in whatever I was going to create, whatever I was going to do, because I'd known her since I was 16, right? And she was on the board, and she was one of the conference chairs, and really wanted to get me to the conference in Seattle so I could see more work and expand my idea of what theater for young audiences, and specifically theater for the very young, could be. So she kind of snuck me in to her suitcase. Yeah, I love it. We roomed together when we got there. She got me in. She was like, this is my intern. I wasn't her intern. This is my intern. And I had the opportunity then to hang out with the other interns for the conference and make friends with them. And ultimately, they folded me into their operation. So I was able to run the very first conference that I attended with TYA USA. I ran as an intern that snuck in. But
amazing.
They're just so welcoming. Everyone in this community is just so yes and. Don't you agree?
Oh, I absolutely do. And it's, oh man, first of all, the power of mentors and the power of people seeing potential in you and wanting to help foster that and grow that any way possible. I love that piece of your story. And yeah, the yes and the welcoming. That is why I love working in theater for young audiences and working with artists and presenters and agents, because we all have the same goal and the same mission, and we want to build each other up and bring the work along and make sure our audiences are taken care of in all these various ways. So, I totally get that. I love that so much. So that leads me directly to one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today was the most recent TYA USA conference, which was hosted recently at the Alliance Theater in Atlanta, Georgia. You're the board president. It was hosted at your home venue. So I just want to start with like a brief recap of the conference, both the in-person and the virtual tracks. How did it go? What was the vibe? What were some of your major takeaways from the conference? Because it's been, we all know, 5 years of immense change and sort of unevenness and unknowing. We just don't know what's coming next. So I think it's always important to reflect on sort of the conversations we have when we're together and how are we going to take those forward with us?
Yeah. I'm trying to characterize this in my brain. As you were talking, I was like, how do I speak aloud the feeling of the conference this year? It was utter magic. I think there were a lot of things that sort of contributed to that magic, right? There was the community connection. So even from the moment we opened the registration table, old friends are getting together. They may not see each other all year until they get to the conference together. So there's magic in these little intimate moments that are happening at check-in or in between, grabbing a cup of coffee, in between conference breakout sessions. That magic is not something that we can plan for. We just know will happen. The magic of having so many theater practitioners leading sessions, it was truly like crowdsourced conference breakouts that are important now. We can plan way far in advance and say, these are the things we would love folks to know. But what the conference happening every year affords us is that we can be responsive and know that like, this is the conference session you need right now, or that we would recommend for you right now, because we're all facing very like specific challenges year over year. And I mean, you mentioned the past 5 years, there's been so much change. Every conference, every time that we host the conference, something big has happened, and we have to, address it head on, and we have to lift each other up and provide resources to each other. Our challenges, while they're similar, they're regional as well. And maybe some of us are feeling the impact earlier or later. And so by getting together, we're able to share some potential solutions for each other that otherwise you will only be able to like reach your hand out to your local community for answers for. When we gather as a field, as a national field, we're able to then be more responsive to each other and sort of get ahead of some of those really big challenges that folks have yet to face but are on the horizon. Another piece of magic is that we really prioritized having young people present the entire conference. So it was probably the most intense week of the year for hosting at the Alliance Theater. We were coming off of the weekend before, we opened our third TYA show in a rep in our brand new youth and family stage. So backtracking for context, in January of 2026, we opened a brand new youth and family stage called the Goizueta stage for youth and families. It is a new dedicated space in our building at the Woodruff Art Center that is prioritizing and demanding that space is for TYA and for symphony for young people to happen year round. So we're not constantly battling with the adult programming or rentals, but that we have a dedicated space that we can really look at the schedule of what works for families and for schools, and we can make something that works for them, not just what works for us. So we're celebrating this space. We decided in our first year, we're going to open 3 shows in rep, same cast, same set, different shows, all throughout a 6-month span of time. The week before the conference, we open our 3rd show. Now we have our full rep of 3 shows running. That Tuesday, we start our summer camp season here, where it's the largest summer camp season of our history. We're hosting almost 4,000 students over 11 weeks in 15 locations. And it's our first day is Tuesday. Wednesday, we start the conference and we welcome 375 members from across the country, theater practitioners from across the country, to gather here and celebrate and see work. We're welcoming in a piece that we presented from Filament Theater in Chicago. So we're hosting folks, right? Friday, our camps are all celebrating. They're all performing in every single nook and cranny that the conference was not in. We had campers performing their own work. And then Saturday and Sunday, we were hosting our Toddler Takeover Arts Festival powered by PNC. It was bananas. And then Monday, we started over with camp. So it really never stopped. While that was really, really challenging, I'll say, for our staff and for our resources, it was so rewarding to have kids going through the hallways as we were transitioning out of breakout sessions. We had our campers all got to see multiple shows. So then our members that are here for the conference were seeing the show with the intended audience instead of imagining how the audience would respond.
Yes. I love that. I love that. I love when you can make that happen. That's so great.
Yeah. And you can't always do that depending on the calendar, right? But this magic of like this week was amazing. The final thing that really tipped us over the edge of did we just live that or was that an amazing fever dream, was our closing keynote was simply incredible. So we were opening just a couple weeks ago, we opened a brand new world premiere show, Basura, which is written and composed by Gloria and Emily Estefan and written by Karen Zacharias.
Yes.
So this piece is definitely an intergenerational story. It features the power of young people. We aligned our dates because we wanted the conference to be able to see this show, and we wanted Gloria and Emily and Karen to be our closing keynote. So ultimately, we got our dream. They were our closing keynote, which we got to announce as a surprise at the welcome. But it didn't stop there. They were all on stage in conversation with our artistic director, Chris Moses, and they're talking about the root, the inspiration for the show is the recycled orchestra of Catiera from Paraguay. And they said they were talking about them for a while, and they talked about like meeting some of them and hearing their stories. And Gloria turns and said, well, would you like to see them yourself? And out come the young people from the Recycled Orchestra of Paraguay onto the stage with their instruments, with the band leader, the orchestra leader from Paraguay. They come out and do an entire concert for us as a surprise. It was so powerful. Their instruments have been traveling all across the world with them in these engagements to present their work. They're masterful musicians at the age of 15, 16, 17. And their instruments themselves are all made of recycled materials from their town. So also just imagining like the traveling back and forth with young people with instruments that are delicate, that these students are then fixing along the way. If anything breaks, they have to just keep going. They have to make it happen. And, not a dry eye in the house. Everyone is out, up on their feet, out of their seats, dancing and celebrating these young people. I mean, there's no topping it. And we're going to have a really hard time when we host this conference again.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I feel like you've set the bar really, really high for this year.
Yeah, I don't know. Chris turned to me and he's like, well, we got to end it here. I don't know. I don't know what else to do after this.
No more conferences. It's just done after that. Well, and I think that, when we talk about the conference landscape writ large, right, in the live performing arts field, we have regional conferences, national conferences. I do love what TYA USA does because it does focus so much on the art making and the artists and seeing work and demonstrating how the artists interplay with presenters. And then we're talking about issues in the field. You have the ability to focus so much more and really serve all different parts of the field, everyone who's there, which is why I love this conference so much. And I mean, to have something so special like that happen, like in all my years of going to conferences, I've never seen something quite like that. I'm really jealous that I was not there this year to see it myself. It sounds amazing. Curious, like it was the board president between staff and board. How do you even go about planning that and prioritizing, performances and the breakout sessions and identifying the top issues, the issues that are top of mind that you want to talk about? How do you go about planning that? And then what came out of those sessions that you then planned? Like, were there any surprises or any topics that sort of came out of the woodwork that you weren't expecting?
What is really fortunate about our relationship now between TYA USA and Alliance Theater is this was the third full conference that we presented here in our building. So there's a little bit of institutional knowledge, and myself and Chris Moses have been a part of each of those three. Sarah and her team have been a part of the past two. So we have sort of what's really useful from a logistical side, which is maybe not as exciting to talk about, but there are templates and systems. Everyone knows what the rooms look like. Like, we don't have to have a special trip out to tour the facility because we've been here, we've hosted it, we even have audience feedback. We have our member feedback saying, hey, this room was a little tight. Hey, this room was a little warm. And we can be responsive by hosting it again at the same venue. So I think that is definitely to our benefit, and something that we're excited to continue to build upon is this just homecoming. Potentially every 2 years, we're coming and rooting at the Alliance, where we have space for everyone to gather in one building. So I think that's really exciting. When we think about producing and programming the event, this year was particularly exciting for a couple of the reasons I've mentioned. It was particularly exciting having Basura, which is on our main stage It features the story of resilient young people. It's kind of a perfect like grounding piece. And at the same time, aligning with our Toddler Takeover, which is a whole art center that features work for very young audiences, we've got this great spectrum of baby theater up to teen and adult programs. So everything in between. So folks that are working on any age in between that spectrum have something for them. We had our 3 shows already running in the Goizueta. So the 3 that were in the underground rep were running as well. So we had this built-in series of work that was already going to serve the majority of the audiences that that our members are serving. So then we start looking at what are the holes that we're missing that folks might have a very specific interest in. One in particular was finding something that was hyper specific for babies, something innovative, something that featured an international connection. And that's where Filament Theater, their production of Rain came in. That production started at Threshold in Australia, and the Australian team trained and directed the Chicago-based team at Filament to now deliver that piece across the country in the US. So it made the work more sustainable, where the Australians are not then needing to travel to the US to have a US-based audience frequently enough, to build that audience. But now they have their show presented through Rain. So we had a hyper-specific piece specifically for babies. If you could walk, you were too old for the room. and the magic and care involved in that was incredible. I've heard so many beautiful stories from caregivers who came to each of those performances saying it was just so nice to be in community in a space where I knew my baby and the way that they are currently is accepted and celebrated. So we had that sort of as one of the main pieces we were going to present that was not something that was just featuring Alliance Theater programming. We also wanted to feature young performers, and we have this great teen ensemble here at the Alliance. But we wanted to make sure that they had an experience that wasn't just another play we were doing here at the theater. So we brought in West Hyler and his really innovative piece called Listen, which is basically, I'll describe it as like a silent disco promenade theater. So every audience member put on those silent disco headphones and they picked a channel and they got to follow 3 storylines that all come together. So you chose your own adventure along the way, and the performers were all teenagers. There were 2 adult performers, but they were all teenagers, and celebrating them immediately after seeing professional adult actors in the Goizueta just felt so natural that we need to continue to be thinking about what space do young people take up on our stages and not just in our audiences. So that was pretty thrilling to be able to think about multiple perspectives, thinking about what is the way in for the youth theater? What is the way in for the regional theater? What is the way in for the presenters? So we present every year our Song Slam Cabaret. And this year it featured 10 really amazing, often hilarious, dance-worthy pieces of new musical theater for young audiences. We moved it up in the time of day, actually, which was a huge hit. More people were able to attend this year than ever. And it was just nice to see new work and development, too. So then you have independent artists being celebrated on stage with their new work, getting in front of theaters that could present them or produce them. I mean, it was really thrilling. Sarah is really intentional. Sarah Morgulis, our executive director of TYA USA, is really intentional about thinking of every affinity group that TYA USA currently serves and what is their way in, what's their pathway, what's their doorway into this work. So we think about it that way in the programming, and that's mostly small group with input from the board. But when it comes to the breakout sessions, that is a huge collaboration across the board. So we launched the application, the request for proposals for the breakout sessions. And then we have subcommittee groups that that read through all of the applications and give their feedback on whether they recommend or maybe don't recommend and would prefer them to try again next year, or maybe this story needs to happen in the following year, or they need to keep working on it. We give that kind of feedback when we can, but then we're able to have multiple voices. It's not just me and Sarah and Chris and Rachel Lee, who's our programming manager at TYUSA. It's not just the four of us in a room planning everything, but that we get more perspectives coming in. Sarah and the team at TYUSA is also really intentional about the host venue having a voice in those rooms. So we invite in staff from the Alliance that are not working on any specific part of the conference quite yet to have a voice in reading and responding as an individual and then also as the host theater. So we get even more voices at the table.
I love that. I love that diversity of perspective and making sure that it's going to, whatever you're offering is going to serve, again, all the different affinity groups, all the different parts of the field.
Yeah.
Were there any surprises that came out of the conference this year, like conversations that you weren't expecting or took up more space than you were expecting? Anything people were really passionate about or really bubbled to the surface that was like, oh, this is a bigger issue than we anticipated it was going to be, or this is something we didn't know was happening, out in the field that like we need to pay attention to?
I would say our board is pretty diverse in perspective. So we often feel that we have a relatively solid understanding of what's going on nationally and thinking about the different affinity groups. We're in constant communication with each other. That's a beautiful thing about these monthly affinity calls that we have with our members is we're constantly hearing their feedback. So we're not overwhelmed by big, sweeping new ideas when we gather in person at the conference because we're constantly in dialogue and in conversation. Two main ones that are coming up that are more of folks we can serve that we're maybe not serving fully and is now a priority group for us. One is really thinking more intentionally about university partnerships and how are we supporting students and faculty as they're training the next generation of theater practitioners, theater leaders, and artists. So that is it. We have the new scholarship working group that is presenting at the conference annually. So they're bringing forth their scholarship. They're in rich dialogue with each other, and it's uplifting new ideas in practice and pedagogy. So that's one way that we're serving them, but we know that there's so much more we can do, and we're investigating that throughout the year this year as a major priority for the organization. The other one is theaters that don't have a TYA program yet, but they have an education department. And often the education department is a department of one, and they're carrying a heavy load for the theater. They have major revenue goals, but very little resource internally and little investment as an organization. So thinking about the regional theaters that are dipping their toe into TYA and bringing young people into their audiences, they could really benefit from the knowledge base that we have as a membership. So we're looking at ways that we can engage them this year and see how much we can support them and uplift their work in an effort that hopefully they'll add in more TYA programming, or they'll feel more supported in their education department through their classes and their camps and their community conversations. So those are two big things that we were hearing, even from the conference, of folks that maybe came from one of those two sectors and said, hey, I actually have 10 friends who would really benefit from this kind of conversation. When can I invite them? And we say immediately. So those are things that we're investigating. Our field is tired. I mean, we really are kind of beat up, right? We are doing our best to uplift children and the experience of being a young person in this country. And that is especially challenging right now. There is so much access to really scary things out in the world, and they're experiencing so many really scary things. And theater is a way that we can process that, but not every kid has access to it. So it's a tough time. But when we get together, we're reminded of the importance of this work. There was this one really beautiful moment that when we were together at the conference in the first performance together, we had our welcome conversation very quick. We launched right into our production of Into the Burrow, A Peter Rabbit Tale, which is a new telling of the Peter Rabbit story. And we're watching it with probably like 20 young people of varying elementary to middle school ages. And Peter is really struggling with, he's afraid. His dad was baked into a pie. He's really fearful of humans, but he needs to face a human above ground to get his food back and support his friends. But he's really having a hard time, and he really goes there. This actor really goes there. And a kid in the audience, just in the middle of a silent moment, while Peter is thinking, should I go or should I hide? This child goes, I love you, as loud as they possibly could. And you heard a collective like, in the audience. And we're reminded that they need to see these stories of young people overcoming their fears and being proud and confident and brave. And they're with you for the ride. We just, we need to remember that. So that was a really big, powerful moment that happened that we definitely were pulling back every moment that we could talk about it. We were bringing that story back into the conversation. Like, but that kid loves you.
Yeah. I love that so much. It's such a beautiful reminder that kids feel so much more deeply and understand so much more than we ever give them credit for. And what we do is such a beautiful way of helping them find that in themselves and express that in themselves. Like that makes me like a little emotional because it sounds like a beautiful moment. But I think that one of the reasons that like I love the work that TYA USA does and the work that we do is it centers kids in such a completely different way than any other medium does. And yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. So jumping off of that, burnout and tired or being tired, you see that moment or you experience that moment. What would you say to those out there listening that are in that moment of tiredness? They don't know how we're in the middle of summer, right? So it's summer camps. You're planning next season. You're gearing back up for next season of school matinees or producing new work. What would you say, or, what was the conversation like about taking care of ourselves, taking care of each other, getting the resources we need from boards, for instance, or institutional leadership so we can continue on this work?
Some major things that are coming up in my mind around, taking care of yourself and not totally crashing out at the probably hottest time of year. For many of us, it's the busiest time of year, even more so than the holiday season. It's a time that we think back on as children and often feel like it was the best time of the year, right? That when we think through a nostalgic lens, we remember summer being this joyful time where we were free to exist and have fun and play outside and be with our friends. And this feeling feels wrong when we feel bogged down by all of the weight of the challenges that we're facing as like institutionally, individually, as citizens. We're feeling really challenged, I think. And some things that come to mind to take care of ourselves is, one, to see the work. I spend a lot of time at a computer or in back-to-back meetings because I'm doing the planning for whatever is coming next, while the thing that is magic is happening in another room. We had conversations about making space to be with the young people because they really regenerate. They really uplift you in a way that they are so full of hope. In the future, they can see a path forward, and it's nice to have a reminder of that. And also just showing face and being in community with young people that you're serving is a good thing for everybody, I think. I think advocating to your leadership and to your board that people need different things to feel supported. There is no one-size-fits-all answer to burnout. It could be that you need a sleep-in day. It could be that you need an extra week of PTO and you'll figure it out otherwise. It could be that you need childcare resources. it really depends. People are individual people, and there's not one size fits all answer to how to solve the issue of burnout and low resources. But I would hope, and something that I think our board really commits to, is deep listening comes from the top, that we have to be listening to the folks that we support, the folks that we manage, to be able to be responsive. We can't just find whatever new shiny resource that we heard works for somebody else and put it on top of our organization and say, this is probably going to fix how you're feeling. But we do a lot of deep listening. We attend these. So for TYUSA's board, we attend these affinity groups as often as we can. We are in constant conversation with each other about what is coming up, and then listening locally as well, and figuring out what kind of resources does our community need here. And I would venture a guess that other communities are looking for a very similar resource. So an example of that is, creating new work is expensive and often impossible, and you need the resources of time and money and space in order to do that. So something that we did in response to that effort this year as a pilot was we developed the TVY development program at TYAUSA, where the Alliance and TYAUSA partner in supporting one project to develop a new work for very young audiences. We provide them with a stipend. This year, it was $8,000, but we provide them with a creative stipend to kickstart the work. And then they get professional development and visits to the Alliance to see theater for the very young and participate in workshops and rehearsals, so they can see how the work is created here and apply whatever they like and discard whatever they don't like into their own practice. And at the conference, we presented then the workshop version of that inaugural project. So we took a risk. We put some money into a pot, and we elevated two independent artists that had a really strong idea and a love for very young kids. And we're able to provide them with that resource. And it had a major impact, I think, on the field, seeing new work being supported in this way, and this particular subset of new work being for very young audiences, where a lot of theaters are a little scared to do TVY. Financially, it makes no sense, but it makes a big impact.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I struggle with the same thing as a presenter. Like, how in the world can I make this make sense?
Yes, but it makes a major impact. It's an investment in your audiences. Yeah. It is philanthropically really exciting to donors. There are so many benefits depending on, which direction you want to slice it. It is a good thing for everybody when we create work for very young audiences. So
yes.
Anyways, as providing resources, even if it is a small pilot moment, even if it is a coffee chat to hear more, I think deep listening and small bites of resources are better than nothing.
So let's pivot and talk more about creating new work. So I would love to just get a high-level overview of the Alliance Theater, the mission, the work that the Alliance does broadly. And then I have a few questions for you about specifically the Theater for Young Audiences work that you lead at the Alliance. But I think the Alliance Theater is a national presence, but maybe not everybody knows the depth of what the Alliance Theater does. And being situated in Atlanta, folks, on the West Coast or in the Pacific Northwest might not be as familiar. So can you give us just the high-level overview to start?
Alliance Theater is a regional theater. It is the largest regional theater in the Southeast. We are a Tony Award-winning theater that produces work for, primarily you would imagine us as a space where work for adults is presented. We're a producing house. We make new work for adults. We have multiple stages here in our building. But what we're growing in infamy for is our work for young audiences. So we actually serve through our Theater for the Very Young all the way through our main stage productions, birth to beyond, or from entry to exit, whatever way you want to talk about it. But we have something on our stage for every single age group, which I think is really unique for a regional theater of our size. Our mission is to expand hearts and minds on stage and off. And we put a ton of emphasis and infrastructure and resource into that on and off portion of our mission. We have a really robust education department here, and it continues to grow rapidly. Every single year, we are serving more and more young people and their families. We staff the camp with teaching artists from our community and teaching artist trainees. So the camp season is also a training ground and professional development opportunity for emerging teaching artists. And of that, we hire about 250 to 300 individuals just to run our summer camp season. So it's massive. And that's just one piece of our education department. We serve schools by sending artists into schools in residencies where they partner with a classroom teacher and co-teach a residency together with the ultimate goal to become obsolete, because the teacher then becomes the leader in the arts integrated practice that we're presenting to them. So we're working out in as young as preschool. We have infant classes that we have residencies in, all the way through pre-service teachers in universities and training them in arts integrated practices. We have on-site classes. I already mentioned camps. We have on-site classes in everything from musical theater to stage acting to film to playwriting. I mean, you name it, and we offer a class in it. We do a ton of new work development here. It's one of the key features of our work across all ages is we are constantly excited by developing and supporting new playwrights and new work. So majority of the work that we do here either originates at the theater or is in development here at our theater. And that spans from all of our theater for the very young work has been developed and originated here at the theater. We have over 26 scripts, 26 productions that we've done over the course of the years. Our TYA work, primarily we are creating 2 to 3 new TYA shows a year, whether they're in development or in production. And then our adult work, we have a ton of resource behind our new work development in the Riser Lab, which is supporting independent artists with new ideas. And they get sort of workshop productions of their piece, one-night experiences. We have our Candida National Playwriting Competition, which is for graduate playwrights to submit their work. We do a reading series, and there is one that is selected for a full production in our season. So constantly celebrating those emerging playwrights. And then often we are the step before a big musical goes to Broadway. Our stage can hold a lot. We have a ton of resource in our production department, master artisans, the best in the business to create and bring your dream to reality. So we feature a lot of regional premieres for shows that go on to Broadway, like Maybe Happy Ending, Bring It On the Musical, Tuck Everlasting, more than I can name right now.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And we don't have time to get to all of those pieces of programming today. So I highly recommend anyone listening who wants to know more, go to the Alliance Theater website and dig into all of this amazing programming that Olivia has mentioned, because it really is quite impressive. And as I was going through, I was like, oh, there's just more. There's just more. There's just more. And I think it speaks to what the need is and how broadly this the TYA field, theater for the very young, how broad it can be, how many different ways it can serve individuals, from students to teenage, young students to teenagers to their parents. I think it just speaks to how much opportunity there is. So in the time we have left, I want to talk a little bit about producing that new work though, because it really struck me, and I was sort of serendipitously reading an article in the New York Times recently about how Moana, the Disney movie, is now the most streamed Disney movie of all time. And little ones will watch it repeatedly over and over and over again, right? We had seen that with Frozen. Now we see it with Moana. And I think it not only, and that's a developmental thing for kids, but also we've seen that idea of comfort food programming or need for familiarity with adult audiences as well. And it's something that we've been talking about a lot as an industry. So it really struck me that all you do there is produce new work. And I was like, oh, that feels risky in this day and age, right? It's what you do. But so I was just wondering, how do you keep going and producing new work? First of all, just keep that momentum going. But then also, how do you convince audiences to come see new titles? So in Atlanta, and then when you send them off for a life beyond Alliance Theater, how are the companies you're working with convincing audiences to try something new that they're not familiar with, that isn't Go Dog Go or Magic School Bus or these beloved titles, right? Which totally have a place in the field as entry points for a lot of folks. But like some of the things that you mentioned that you're working on, like we don't know what those things are, right? You're building them from scratch. They're brand new. So how do you identify those things and then market them and bring audiences in and partner organizations then give them life beyond Alliance Theater?
Yeah. I will name that we have a really incredible marketing team that supports making sure that we have all the resources we need for the storytelling that happens before you have you're in your seat, right? That we see as much of the show that doesn't give it away as possible so you can get the energy of what the show is, that you meet the characters and they aren't so mysterious, right? And thinking specifically around TVY and TYA, so Theater for the Very Young and Theater for Young Audiences, we often lean into themes. So what themes can we be drawing to? Our Atlanta audience loves bold new stories. That is just, that is a gift to the theater that we are, is that our audiences want to see new work and they don't love a repeat. The only, the exception to that rule is Theater for the Very Young. We create new work and then we get to remount it because our audience is constantly aging out and aging in, right? So we're able to create 26, 28 new stories over the course of the time that we've been producing Theater for the Very Young because we hold on to them and we remount 2 to 3 shows a year. And that helps our bottom line. It helps our budget. So we can continue to put more resources in creating new work by remounting work that already exists. So we have costumes and set and we don't have to have developmental time for. So that's one benefit of making new work that then you own and you keep here and you store here, right? Is that you're able to then bring it back again and again. And you have that repeat, like what you're talking about with Moana. The comfort food, the comfort theater can be that I saw Dinosaur last year and now I'm a year older and I want to see Dinosaur again and see what I pick up on next, right? That title is exciting because you kind of imagine what it could be about, but you actually don't know what the story is going to be. You just know the concept dinosaur. So when we're thinking about what are we putting out there in the world, it's like, what is just enough information that gets you excited about it, but there's enough mystery back there where you have to attend to figure it out. So, okay, so that's Theater for the Very Young. With our TYA work, we're constantly looking for stories of strong young people. So young people either exhibiting bravery or resilience, young people being young people, that they're not trying to grow up too fast to show that bravery and that resilience, but that it is innate. We love to feature young people at the center of the story. And this year is a great example of that, where every one of our shows on the Goizueta stage will feature a young performer as that lead character. So then children will be able to see themselves in the show because they will see a peer on stage. But yeah, Atlanta audiences love new work. They love new stories. And I will say it, they love the Alliance. We have built trust over the years. We've been producing theater for young audiences since the Alliance Theater started. It started as there was a children's theater and an adult theater, and they came together. So we've always had TYA as a part of our company. So we are trusted in the community and the Metro Atlanta community. We are a household name, which is so thrilling. So they'll trust that we're going to bring them something really extraordinary and want to return again and again. But we also invest in our partnerships with schools. So we do a ton of work in cultivating relationships with local school systems. So we have student matinees. The teachers just trust that we have the best interests of the students at heart, that we can help them meet these learning goals by existing in the theater space and enjoying theater. We've seen through multiple studies the benefits of attending theater, that you become more tolerant of multiple perspectives, absenteeism goes down, that we are going to school. We are excited to go see the performance that is on our docket for our field trip. We are more connected. Our test scores are going up. There's so many benefits that if I don't know the title, I know that I can hit these benefits by attending a show at the theater. I'm going to go. I'm going to take a chance.
And I think some of those studies are on the Alliance Theater website. I was poking around in them earlier today as well. So definitely recommend going to check them out. So what I'm hearing is trust, right? You have to do the programming and you just have to put in the time and effort in building trust. And even if it's a little scary for a venue to invest in that way, the only way you'll reach your goal is just by doing it, right? It feels, want immediate success so often of like, and if it doesn't, knock our socks off, we're not going to do it again. But what I'm hearing is just like, it is a slow and steady investment of time and energy and resources into your local community to build that notion that like, oh, whatever they bring me is going to be great. So I'm just going to go. I'm just going to bring my kids.
Yeah. And teaching artists are such a big piece of this. Like having your teaching artists as your biggest cheerleaders out in the community, doing the work one-on-one with students, one-on-one with teachers, really celebrating the stories that are happening on your stage. People are so excited to come see the whole show in its entirety because they did a lesson with this teaching artist in their classroom and their kid will not stop talking about it when they get home at the dinner table. So I think also investing in your local artists and getting them as advocates for the pieces of theater that you're presenting is a huge asset that I think we all have. There are artists in every community.
Oh, I love that. And I think actually I could talk to you all day, Olivia, but we don't have time for that, unfortunately. Oh my gosh. There's so much amazing work that you and the team at the Alliance Theater and the team at TYA USA are doing. So I'm just blessed to be a part of this community. We're blessed to have leaders like you doing this work and helping others along the way. So thank you for taking the time today. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show.
This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for having me. It was such a treat.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends.
All right, let's keep going. Come on.
Tightly
Not
wrapped.
time to pat ourselves on the back.
All right, bring us back in, Brian.